The lie came dressed as love, Leo, my dad said. His voice cracking like a broken violin string. Your sister Emma won't survive without a liver transplant. Please. You're her only chance. I stared at him. His eyes were red, wet, desperate. His hands clutched mine like a man begging for air. My name is Leah. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because I have a question. Have you ever been used by the very person you thought would protect you? That night, I said yes. Not because I wanted to. Not because I was ready. But because the way he said Emma's name made me believe I was already too late. He begged, and I broke. I agreed, but betrayal doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through a flicker of light on a forgotten tablet, through a string of emails left open like a wound point. One line froze me. Leo is loyal. Just say Emma won't make it. He'll sign anything. I read it again. And again. It wasn't Emma's life he cared about. It was the power of pulling my strings, his sobs, his trembling hands, the begging, a performance, and in that moment, my love for him turned into something else. Something sharper, because I realized, this wasn't a plea for Emma's survival. This was a con. That night, I didn't just cry out, I started keeping records, and in my silence, I began building something stronger than obedience. A file. I didn't sleep that night, the glow of his tablet burned in my mind. Every word etched like acid. Leo is loyal. Just say Emma won't make it. He'll sign anything. The house was quiet, except for Emma's faint coughing in the next room. My sister, my sweet sister, really was sick. That much was true. But my dad had turned her illness into theater. Her pain was his prop, my loyalty his leverage. I wanted to scream. Instead, I started documenting the emails, the dates, the names. Every whisper of manipulation. I began forwarding copies to a private account only I knew existed. Each click felt like a dagger sliding silently into place. By morning, Dad was humming in the kitchen, frying eggs like he hadn't just sold me out in writing. He kissed my forehead. Thank you, Leo. You're saving Emma's life. I stared at him, wondering how a man could wear love like a mask so perfectly. Anything for family, I said. Forcing the words, tasting the poison of them, but inside me, something was shifting. Have you ever had that moment when the ground under your feet doesn't just shake, it splits? And suddenly, you're no longer standing with your family, but on the other side of a chasm, staring across at strangers? That was me. That morning, Dad thought I was cornered. But what he didn't know was that my file was already growing. I dug deeper. Buried in his emails were threads with a clinic in Mexico. Numbers. $signs. Bargains made in shadows. He wasn't planning to save Emma in the light. He was planning to cash out her pain overseas, and me? I was the collateral. The donor. The obedient pawn. But pawns, if they live long enough, learn how the game works. That night, I slipped a flash drive into the back of his laptop. Copied everything. Every contract. Every price tag, and as the progress bar crawled forward, I realized something. I wasn't just gathering evidence. I was sharpening my weapon, because love had been twisted into blackmail. And loyalty into currency, and I had decided, I wasn't going to bleed for him. I was going to bury him. By the third night, my hands no longer shook, fear had calcified into something else, cold, sharp, deliberate. I sat cross-legged on my bed. The flash drive pressed between my palms like a relic. Inside it was every lie my father thought would stay hidden. Emails to foreign doctors. Transfer receipts. Promises of cash that smelled of desperation, and Emma's name, over and over, twisted into leverage. I thought about confronting him, screaming until the walls cracked. But that would have given him power, let him rewrite the story with his tears and trembling hands. No. My war had to be silent. My revenge had to be patient. So I started studying him. At breakfast, he scrolled his phone with a smile that never reached his eyes. At night, he locked his office door but left his laptop charging, a lifeline to the secrets he thought I couldn't touch. He believed his act so deeply he didn't notice me slipping deeper into his world. Have you ever watched someone you love, someone you trusted, and realized they were nothing more than a stranger playing dress up as your family? That's what it felt like, living with a ghost who wore my father's face, but Emma was still real. Still coughing in her room, still fragile. She didn't know she'd been reduced to a bargaining chip. And I couldn't let her die in his game. So I made a choice. I wouldn't just collect evidence. I'd weaponize it. I created folders labeled with dates, subjects, sums of money. I printed hard copies and sealed them in envelopes. Some I hid in my closet. Others I mailed to a P.O. box under a false name, insurance, because if he suspected me, if he even tried to silence me, the truth would already be set free. Every whisper, every click of a mouse, every document saved. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival, and the more I gathered, the more I saw the edges of his empire of lies crumbling. But files weren't enough. Evidence wasn't enough. To end him, I'd need allies. People who understood the weight of betrayal and the value of truth, and I knew exactly where to find them, because in those same emails, buried in the threads, were names of officials, donors, even his business partners, men who would burn if his scheme ever saw daylight. He thought he held all the strings, but I was already weaving the noose. The first move had to be small. Invisible. A whisper. Not a scream. I started with a test point one evening. While Dad was in his office, I slipped into the living room. Emma curled under a blanket on the couch. Her skin looked pale, translucent almost, but her eyes lifted to me when I sat beside her. Do you know what's going on? I asked softly. She shook her head. Dad just says you're helping me. That you're brave. Her voice broke on the word. Brave. The same lie he fed me dressed up as praise. I smiled for her sake, but inside, something cracked. She was innocent. She didn't know her life had been weaponized. That night, I printed one page from my file, a single email, stripped of context, where Dad casually negotiated a payment in cash with a clinic in Mexico. I left it on his desk, half buried under a pile of envelopes, and then I waited. By morning, it was gone. Dad's face at breakfast was calm, maybe too calm. His smile stretched tight, his eyes darting at me just once, like a flicker of suspicion. Good. He knew the walls weren't airtight anymore. Have you ever watched a predator realize it might not be the only hunter in the room? That was the look in his eyes. But predators are dangerous when cornered. And I knew if I pushed too fast, he'd turn on me. So I kept playing the dutiful daughter. Cooking dinner. Sitting with Emma. Pretending I was still the pawn he believed me to be, but beneath the surface, I was sharpening my blade. I reached out to an old college friend, Nora, who now worked for a local paper. I sent her redacted copies, told her I was working on something personal, asked her to hold them in confidence. She agreed, her voice steady, but I could hear the curiosity in her silence. One day, soon, she'd get the whole story, and when she did, the world would too. That night, I crept past Dad's office and saw him hunched over his laptop, whispering into his phone. His words slithered through the crack in the door. We need to move faster. I don't trust her. Her. Me. I smiled in the dark hallway. Because the truth was, he was right. He shouldn't trust me, and if he wanted to accelerate his game, so be it. I was ready to play faster too, because every day he schemed, my file grew heavier, and one day soon, the weight of it would crush him. Paranoia makes men sloppy. Within a week, Dad's mask started to slip. He was on the phone constantly, whispering in clipped tones, shutting doors that he used to leave open. At dinner, he watched me too closely, like I might crack at any second and confess what I knew, but I didn't crack. I leaned and I asked about Emma's medication, about hospital bills, about the future. My questions were knives wrapped in velvet. Every time his answers faltered, I made sure he saw me nod. Saw me believe him. That was the key. Let him think I was still under his spell, but behind the curtain, I was tightening the noose. I created a second flash drive, filled only with the worst evidence, the contracts, the dollar amounts, the names. Then I placed it in an envelope addressed to Nora, tucked it into my backpack, and left it there. A safety net I carried everywhere. If Dad made a move, Nora would get it all, and still, I wanted more. So I started recording every whispered phone call I caught through the door, every conversation he had with me about Emma's dire condition. His voice, dripping with manufactured grief, would become the soundtrack to his downfall. Have you ever felt the fire of betrayal burn so hot it stopped hurting and started fueling you instead? That was me. Each new lie was gasoline, and I was already holding the match. One night, Emma asked me, Leah, are you scared? I looked at her. Her face was thin, her eyes heavy, but still kind. Still innocent. Yes, I whispered. But not of what you think. I couldn't tell her the truth, not yet. Her heart was already fragile. The weight of our father's betrayal might shatter it completely. So I carried it alone, but carrying it made me stronger. That week, Dad snapped. He cornered me in the kitchen after midnight, his face shadowed in the half-light. "Were you in my office?" he asked. His tone wasn't curious. It was an accusation. I met his stare, steady, calm. Why would I be? His jaw flexed. His eyes narrowed. For a moment, I thought he might strike me. But then he smiled. A slow, poisonous curve of his lips. "Good," he murmured. "Stay loyal, Leah. For Emma's sake." Then he left. I stood alone. The refrigerator humming behind me. My fists clenched so tight my nails cut crescents into my palms. He thought fear would silence me, but fear only taught me how to be quiet long enough to finish building the trap, and soon the trap would spring. The moment to act wasn't loud, it arrived quietly. Like a breath before a storm. I was in Emma's room, tucking a blanket around her thin shoulders, when Dad's voice drifted down the hall. He wasn't careful anymore. His paranoia had turned into recklessness. "Yes, Mexico. Cash only. The girl will fold. She always does." The girl. Me. Emma stirred in her sleep, her lips parting as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. I pressed her hand gently, then slipped into the hall. The phone cord stretched from Dad's office, the door cracked just enough for me to hear the predator in his element. I didn't record this one. I didn't need to. His words were already seared into me. Instead, I took my plan into motion. That night, I emailed Nora everything, the full file. Not redacted. Not softened. The contracts. The negotiations. The messages dripping with calculated cruelty, the subject line, "If anything happens to me," and then I waited. The next morning, Dad called me into his office. His eyes gleamed, restless, his smile strained. On the desk between us lay 2 tickets. "Mexico," he said softly. "For Emma's surgery. We leave next week. You'll do this for her, won't you, Leah?" His tone was silk over steel. A demand masquerading as a plea. I let my lips tremble. I let my voice crack. "Of course, Dad. Anything for Emma." And in that moment, I wasn't lying. I would do anything for Emma. But not what he thought, because the difference between us was simple. He used Emma's life as a bargaining chip. I used his lies as a weapon. That afternoon, Nora called. Her voice was sharp, urgent. "Leah, this isn't just a family secret. This is criminal. Fraud. Coercion. If we publish this, your father won't just lose his reputation, he'll face charges." I closed my eyes. The weight of years pressed down on me. "Good," I whispered, but I wasn't ready for headlines yet. Not until Emma was safe. So I asked Nora to hold back. Just for a week, because if Dad wanted Mexico, I'd give him Mexico, not as his pawn, but as his executioner. Have you ever stepped so deep into betrayal that you stopped recognizing yourself in the mirror? That was me, but I didn't care, because I wasn't looking for the girl who said yes anymore. I was becoming the woman who would say no, and when the time came, my no would burn down everything he built. Mexico smelled of salt and dust. The kind of air that clung to your lungs. Dad walked through the airport like a man carrying salvation in his briefcase. His suit was pressed, his steps confident, but his eyes flicked to me too often, like he was checking if his puppet's strings were still intact. Emma was too weak to travel. She stayed behind, which made his lies sharper, his cruelty clearer. This trip wasn't about saving her. It was about completing a deal. In the hotel room, I watched him count stacks of US dollars, crisp bills fanned across the bedspread. He didn't notice me watching, he was too lost in his calculations. In the thrill of control. I kept my silence. I let him think I was scared, obedient, broken, but tucked inside my jacket was a recording device. Every word he spoke in that room, every dollar counted, every plan whispered, it was all mine. The next day, he led me to a clinic tucked into the backstreets, its walls stained, its halls too quiet. A man in a white coat greeted him in Spanish, eyes darting to me. "This is her," Dad said. His hand pressed to my shoulder, heavy, possessive. "She's ready to give." Ready to give. I clenched my jaw to keep from laughing, because in that moment, I realized he didn't know Nora had the file. He didn't know US authorities had been looped, and once she recognized the names in his emails, corrupt officials, dirty money trails. He didn't know the FBI had already flagged his passport. He thought I was walking into surgery, but really? He was walking into a cage. The clinic doors opened wider, and I stepped inside. My pulse steady. Have you ever felt the moment when fear leaves you completely, replaced by something cleaner, colder? That was me, for the first time. I wasn't afraid of my father. I was waiting to watch him fall, and when the sirens finally cut through the Mexican heat, echoing down the street, when uniformed officers filled the halls and the man in the white coat bolted, Dad turned to me, eyes wide, mouth open. Betrayal written across his face. As if I had betrayed him, but this was never betrayal, this was justice. Waiting patiently for its stage, they dragged him out of the clinic in handcuffs, his suit jacket twisted, his tie askew, his face pale with the shock of a man who finally realized the game wasn't his anymore. He shouted my name once, raw, guttural, but it wasn't anger. It was disbelief. How could his dutiful daughter, his loyal Leo, be the one to end him? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The officers shoved him into a van, its metal door slamming shut like a gavel. The echo rang in my chest, sharp and final. Back in the hotel room, I sat on the bed where his money had been scattered just hours before. The silence was heavier now, but cleaner. I called Nora. She didn't ask if it was over. She just said, "It's all going public tomorrow." And it did. Headlines screamed of fraud, coercion, and black market deals. His business partners scattered. His bank accounts froze. By the time Emma read the news, he was already across the border again, this time in shackles. Facing charges that would bury him for good. She looked at me with tears brimming. Her voice barely above a whisper, "You saved me." And I did. But it didn't feel like saving. It felt like surviving. Like pulling her out of the fire my father had built and walking away covered in ash. Have you ever carried the weight of betrayal so heavy it bends your spine, and then, one day, it just falls away? That was the day for me. I thought I'd feel empty. Instead, I felt free, because love without trust is a chain. And betrayal, once exposed, is the key. When the verdict came months later, I didn't attend the trial. I didn't need to hear the judge declare him guilty. I didn't need to watch him crumble under the weight of his own schemes. I already knew the ending. He lost everything, and me? I walked Emma into the sunlight, her hand in mine, knowing that sometimes justice doesn't roar, it whispers. Quiet. Unshakable, the kind that doesn't need revenge to taste sweet, because truth was enough, because finally, we were free.